Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today, I'll be discussing the top 10 board games that I played at BGG.con 2016. You can see the list of them here, and feel free to click ahead and watch the ones you specifically want to see. I've already covered games 11 through 25 in a previous video, which you can watch by clicking the little eye in the top right corner. And just like in the previous video, I've ranked these with an interesting mixture of the raw fun that I had with the game, along with how good I think the actual game is. So without further ado, let's jump in. At number 10, we have Doggy Go, which is one of the bigger surprises of the convention to me. First, because I never heard of it before, and second, because I had a lot more fun with it than I was expecting to when it first hit the table. And that happened because my friend Dave saw it in the library and thought it was too cute not to grab and see what the heck was going on inside this box that has little doggy ears on the top. And when you open it up and you give all the pieces out to everybody, we all get 7 of these incredibly adorable cuboid dog tiles. And what you're doing is simultaneously trying to orient them on top of each other, stack them, and have them go through like flaming hoops and flying off trapezes in order to match these goal cards that are in the middle of the table that are flipped over simultaneously. And when you flip them over, everybody's supposed to yell out, "Doggy Go!" at the same time. And we did that, and it really did help the frantic, silly atmosphere of this game. And once you have perfectly matched one of the goal cards, you yell out "goal," and then if you have done it, if everybody agrees that you oriented the dogs correctly, then you take that card and it's worth points to you at the end of the game. But if you messed up somehow, then you actually lose one of your point cards you already have. And it was surprisingly easy to mess up in slight ways by rotating one dog slightly off, especially because the dogs have a front and a back side. And the back side has little feet sticking up in the air, and it's a lot harder to wrap your brain around exactly how to orient them correctly. And it's surprising how well they stack on top of each other to make this aesthetically adorable little panorama in front of you. I will admit that we had some issues with the rules of this game, even though it was so incredibly simple, because it didn't seem to have enough of the little tool cards for everybody to play with. But we sort of improvised our own rules, put all the tools in the middle of the table, and had people, try to frantically grab the right tools at the same time. The tools being trapezes and flaming hoops and different colored stools that these dogs are going to be stacking up on top of. And it worked. I'm not even sure if we played the game correctly, but we had a bunch of fun playing it. This game got played again with my group of friends later on with some different people, and it seemed like universally everybody had a fun, laughing good time with just this adorable little game. Next up, at number 9, we have Honshu. This is a game that I heard a little bit about going into the convention, and it had these cards that I knew you were stacking into a tableau in front of you. And that's pretty much all I knew about it, and I was able to snag a copy at the library, and I enjoyed what I saw. It's essentially a 2-part game where you have one part is trick-taking, and the other part is tile-laying, tableau building in front of you. The trick-taking part is the first half of each turn. You have this hand of cards, and all these cards are the actual cards that you'll be building into your tableau, and they all have numbers on top of them that range from 1 to 60. And people play these cards out one at a time, and then once everybody's played a card, you figure out who won the trick, and that's going to be the card that has the highest number, and that person gets to take one of the 4 cards and build it into their little tableau area in front of them. You're able to buff up the value of your trick by giving up these little resource cubes and putting it on top of the card to drastically increase its value. I think it was like plus 40 or plus 50, so it's a big bump up. You're probably going to win, or at least be second place if you're going to be ditching these cubes, but that's important because what you're trying to do with the cards in front of you is you have the most points at the end of the game, and a big part of that is using these little cubes because you gain the cubes, but then on other cards or other pieces of cards, there are these factories that consume the cubes in order to give you victory points. So you want to get the right color cube and then get the right color factory at a 1-to-1 ratio, and then if you get another cube, well, you're going to need another one of those factories. Even if you already have a brown factory, you've got to get another one out. You're also trying to do a bunch of scoring things, like trying to have your city blocks on these tiles be orthogonally adjacent, and the biggest one is going to score you points for all of those. The trees just give you points for being there. The lakes will give you points for being 3 or larger. There's just a whole bunch of little things that you're thinking about while you're building this tableau in front of you. And one really great thing is it's not like you're just putting a card down and then putting another one next to it and then making a little tiled grid. You must stack the new card on top of at least 1/6 of a previous card, or you have to tuck at least 1/6 of your new card underneath something else. So you're constantly putting on top and sliding underneath, and it's really important to know that you can't slide the little water spaces underneath, which can very much restrict your options. So that's how the game plays, and we enjoyed it. It got played twice within the group. I only got to play it once. I will admit that trick-taking is not my favorite mechanism in games anyway, and in this one, it almost seemed superfluous. it was just kind of like a way to figure out who was going to go first, but there didn't seem to be a correlation between the high value cards being better than the low value cards, not that you necessarily want that, and it just kind of seemed like you were just constantly playing the highest cards you could, because once you played 3 cards, you actually pass your hand to the right or left, I can't exactly remember, and then you draw back cards, and then once 6 more cards are played, then you pass your hand again. So you're not going to want to give high value cards to your opponents, so you're kind of just playing the best cards from your hand. Occasionally, I wouldn't do that because there was a card that had a factory on it that I really wanted in order to put it into play, and I'd hope that the card was good enough so that I would be high enough in the ranking in order to grab that card and put it into my area. So yeah, I think they probably could have gotten rid of the trick taking entirely and just had it be a hand drafting game, or I think there are many different action selection styles they could have used instead of trick taking, which would have worked just as well. I don't think the trick taking is bad, it just kind of didn't really seem like a big selling point to the game. But I really enjoyed building a little area in front of myself. I don't think I won. I think I came in close. And one other really cool thing about the game is that everybody gets an asymmetric scoring condition for the end of the game. And this is a plus and a minus to me after one play, because some of them were really neat and some of them seemed really boring. And so if you get one of the kind of more boring ones, that's not the funnest thing to do. Like one of them is just the restriction on lakes is less. You don't need to get to 3. I think it's just every lake scores you 2 points. So you're going to be going to grab lakes, but you don't really need the lakes to be adjacent to anything, which means you can be more flexible with building bigger cities or drafting specific cards that can make the factories work for yourself. But that was nowhere near as interesting as somebody who is much more goal-oriented, like the one that I had, said that each of my factories could consume 2 of the cubes. And I felt that that was a very interesting endgame goal, because I was able to not worry about getting factories as much. I could prioritize 2 brown cubes to 1 factory, and I ended up doing well. So that kind of wraps up my feelings on it. I actually purchased a copy of this game. I haven't played it again yet, but I enjoyed it enough to want to keep on playing this one. It played in about 45 minutes, and it was a pretty cool time. Alien Artifacts is game number 8, and this is the only game that I played more than once at this convention. I played it twice, back to back, and it was actually a playtest, because this is being published and produced by Portal Games, and they're going to be releasing it at Gen Con 2017, and they had a pretty interesting idea for this BGG.con. In previous years, they've brought a bunch of games, demoed those games, and tried to sell those games that were published already. But this year, they didn't bring any games to sell. They just had this prototype in their booth, and they had a copy of it in the board game library, and they were just trying to get people to play the game and experience it, try to get their feedback, just extensive playtesting with a group of board gamers who are going to this convention. It seemed like a pretty interesting idea. I'm curious to see how it went overall for them as a business practice. But for me, I played it at their booth, and I actually had their copy from the library. I checked it out, and I opened the box, and it didn't have rules in it. It just said, "Come to our booth so we can teach you the game." And so I played it in the booth, and then I went back and met my friends, and they saw I was carrying it, and they really wanted to try it as well. And I figured, you know what, let's sit down, let's play it again. I'm curious to see how I feel about it on the second try. And in general, I enjoyed both plays of the game. And mechanically what's going on here is it's a card-based 4X style game that plays in about 45 minutes, and that was pretty true. Now, I almost put the 4X thing in quotes because you are researching technologies, so that's the experimentation. You are exploring, you are getting new planets. You don't really do extermination. You can attack your opponents, but it just, if your strength is higher than their strength, then you steal one of their points. So it doesn't hurt their engine, which is good. I'm glad it doesn't really mess people up, but it also didn't feel terribly impactful. And the last thing is exploitation, which in this game was just flipping over the planet. So what you were doing is you're colonizing these planets, and then once you have them, you can flip them over and get a one-time benefit of them. They call that exploitation. You exploit the planet, you can't do that anymore. So I see where they're going for with those 4 X's. But mechanically, this is a multi-use action kind of card game where on your turn, at the end of your turn, you're going to draw these action cards, and they just have different symbols on them that allow you to activate different things. Like the green symbols let you colonize, the blue symbols let you do research, and the red symbols let you increase your strength with your fleet of spaceships. And on your turn, you just play some number of these cards, and it's an engine building game because at the beginning of the game, you can only draw 1 card and play 1 card. Well, okay, you don't have that many options available to you. Every single card has at least 2 colors on them, so you do have some options, but as you play some of the cards down, like as you, for instance, I think it's when you increase your strength, you can now draw more cards, so maybe you're drawing 2 cards now, but you're only playing 1 card. But then once you, oh man, I think it's once you get 2 or 3 of the technologies built, now you can play 2 cards on your turn, and if you get more technologies built, you can play 3 cards. So as you're playing the game, you're increasing the number of cards you draw, the number of cards you play. You also have this bank where you can store money, and the more planets that you colonize, the more money that you could store in this bank. And if you have bigger amounts of money, then you could do some interesting things with it, because you have these thresholds that you can meet in order to increase the drawing of cards and playing of cards, but you can also just straight up spend the money that you have in order to get to those upgrades as well. So you can increase your hand size, drawing up to 2 cards, while still being at a strength of 0 if you just spend like $4 or $6 or something like that. And the game was ludicrously fast to play on your turns. Like, I find it kind of crazy that I'm saying this, but the turns were almost too quick. You would draw the cards, and then it would suddenly be your turn again, because everybody's just like, okay, I'm going to play these cards and do the research. Next turn. Next person's going to, oh, I'm just going to put these down here, and I'm stronger now. Okay, next turn. And it's back to you, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to use these to colonize this planet, and then boom, it's your turn again in like 20 or 30 seconds. Oftentimes like 15 seconds, because the turns can be somewhat straightforward, and I kind of wish that it was a little bit more, they had a little more to think about on your turn. I want the turns to be a little bit longer. And the biggest reason for that is because you discard your whole hand at the end of each turn. So that's not a big deal if you're just like drawing a card and playing a card. But if you're drawing 3 cards and you can only play 1, then you discard the other 2 and then draw 3 more cards at the end of your turn. I almost wish that you were able to keep the cards, or maybe keep some of the cards. You could maybe selectively choose some of the cards to keep and then draw up to a hand size. So maybe you can have one more thing to think about, strategize towards building towards a really big research or something like that, because it can be a bummer when you have this hand of cards and they're really good at researching and you only need like 2 research to finish this thing in front of you, and you have 6 in your hand. You really want to complete this thing, but you use it anyway, and you kind of feel like you had a bunch of you feel like maybe you could have done something really cool, but the thing you really want to do, you just kind of overkill. So I felt like I was just constantly throwing these cards away that were way more action points than I needed, especially once you got to the late game. But that's just one of the small criticisms I have of this game that is still working through its production. Like, the engine building part was really neat. I feel like the extermination bit was not as interesting as I would potentially want it to be. I like that you're not really punching people in the face and messing up their engine when you're attacking them, but it almost seemed like not quite enough, just stealing one of their victory points. I mean, victory points are good, but it seemed like ending scores were like in the 40s-ish points, so stealing 1 point, it's a 2-point swing on that one person, not that big of a deal, especially considering that was your whole action. You could have maybe completed some piece of technology and now had a new kind of game-breaking awesome combo thing that you can do, or maybe you could colonize a planet that would give you 2 or 3 or 4 victory points, or you could just attack that person and take one of theirs. It seemed like it only made sense if you maybe had other technologies that worked really well towards aggression to make that make more sense when you got into the later parts of the game. So to wrap it up, I enjoyed both plays of the game. I liked how fast the turns were. I felt like maybe the turns were a little bit too fast, and I'm pretty interested in seeing where this game goes. They have quite a bit of time to flush this out, try to finagle some of the rough edges, and there were definitely some rough edges, but you would expect that at this point in the game's production cycle. I think it's got some really good bones, it's got a good foundation of a game, and I'm excited to see where it goes. At number 7, we have The Colonists, and this was the big game that I played at the convention. It was a 4.5-hour long experience, and we knew that going into it. In fact, I played it with my friends Matt and Claire, and they really wanted to play it, and I was very interested to give it a shot. And going into it knowing it would be this long, we decided to play it at 8 in the morning. We started it at the crack of dawn for a convention time anyway. And we got our breakfast, got some caffeine, and started playing at 8, and we finished at about 12:30. And we were expecting it to be this long because what's going on in this game is you're playing through multiple eras. It's a 4-era long game, and we actually decided to only play the first 3 eras, knowing it would still be a long game. We were hoping it would be more 3 to 3.5 hours. 4 or 4.5 definitely got a little bit long in the tooth for me, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. So we didn't even do the last era of the game, and this is called the Epic Game of Strategy, I think, on the outside of the box. And what you were doing is kind of an interesting worker placement action selection thing where you have this grid of hexes in the middle of the table, and you have this one pawn. And on your turn, you can move the pawn a certain number of spaces, and on every single spot that you land, you evaluate an action, which is a really cool idea because it means you can really plan out how you want to do things on your turn. You'll go here and take some wood, and then you'll go here and you'll turn that wood into a plank, and then you go to the third spot and spend the plank and maybe a brick you had already to build a new room to put it into your area in front of you. And when you have this hex grid, there are just tons of different options available to you. But that being said, you start in one spot, so it's not like a mind-blowing number of options, especially in the early game. And you are never allowed to go on a spot that your opponent has their pawn on. So there's a bit of the worker placement thing going on there where you might want to do exactly what they just did, but guess what? You can't. You have to do something slightly different. You have to modify your plans. And I really enjoyed this mechanism. And at the end of every one of the seasons, which are to encompass 2 different turns for everybody, you are going to put new tiles out onto this action grid. So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you are playing the game. It starts off like this on the board, and it ended up kind of like this. And we didn't even play the last era of the game. So the complexity definitely ramps up as you are playing the game more and more. So let's talk about what you're actually doing. You're kind of building lots of engines. Like I've talked about the action selection, but when you're essentially trying to get resources to build buildings in a personal tableau that might generate you wood automatically at the end of every single one of these seasons. So you don't have to go to a spot to make wood anymore. You just naturally have wood, and then maybe you have a spot that naturally makes you brick, and that's good as well. And oh, here's a spot that can make you food, but you have to spend these tools, and you have to spend wood and all these types of things to build these buildings in front of you. So it's kind of a classic engine building style thing. You are getting stuff to make stuff that lets you get more stuff to make stuff, etc., etc. And I enjoy that kind of game in a big way. I mean, Through the Ages is one of those style of games, and Through the Ages is also a long game, and it's one of my favorite games. So this are all parts of the reasons why I wanted to jump into this one. And I can say that, like I mentioned before, it felt a little longer than I wanted it to be, and there are multiple ways to play this game. You can play the full game, you know, eras 1, 2, 4, and that probably would have taken us at least another hour and a half, so we would have been in the 6-hour range for that game. Or you can do a speed up thing where you start in era 2, and then you play 2, 3, and 4 if you want to. And there's another way you can play, which is just a simplified board. You flip it over, you start with some automatic buildings, and it's more of a 90-minute experience. And I think I will never play the way that we played again, where, well, I'm certainly going to try not to, where you go Era 1, Era 2, Era 3, because Era 1 really did feel like an extended version of setup. The buildings and the things that you were doing in Era 1 are very mundane, like, oh, get some wood and get some bricks, and then spend those to get a thing that makes you wood, so that you can spend that to make another thing that makes you wood and maybe bricks. Kind of boring stuff. But when you get into the second era, that's when you start making other commodities. And in the third era, you start getting some really interesting buildings going on that might modify. Now your pawn can move 2 spots instead of 1. And you can make these new different types of people that can man all the buildings. There are 3 different types, and we barely even touched the 3rd type. And so it felt like, much like Through the Ages, when you stop an era before the game ends, you're doing the game a disservice, because it's an engine building game. It's ramping up towards this big, explosive, awesome last era, I'm assuming, and it kind of felt like a letdown to not do that last era, although I was definitely ready to play something else at the 4.5-hour mark. So I was not pushing to keep playing the game longer. I just wish we had shifted the whole thing over, not spent the hour and 15 minutes to do the first era, and just maybe spent 10 minutes doing a little setup to jumpstart into the second era and play a much more interesting game. Now, 2 friends of mine played the 90-minute version of this where you flip the board over. I don't know a ton about it, but it looked like it taught a lot of the basics of the game, and it looks like they enjoyed that experience as well. So I don't know much about it, but I think it's cool that that's in the box, that you could play a Colonists game without having it be the super epic thing if you want to play it with people who are more into a 90-minute gaming experience. 2 of my friends, well, the 2 that I play with, Matt and Claire, they are actively trying to purchase a copy of this game, so I'm looking forward to playing it more because I love engine building, and I love the action selection style thing going on in the middle of the table. I just hope we can do the escalated thing to see how that last age is. I ended up winning the game, but I think if we had played the last stage, I would have lost by a mile because Claire was ramping into a much better late game engine than I was, and I just made a whole bunch of theaters, which made me a bunch of money on every turn. The last thing I want to say, and I know I'm saying a lot about this game, is there was one kind of weird thing. So there are these things called embassies, and in general, I love them. The idea of them is that you can build these embassies out onto your little personal tableau, and they give you special abilities that can bend some of the rules, break some of the rules, just give you some stuff. And there you have, I think you start with 3 and then you bring a 4th one out at a certain point in the game, and there are way more than 4 in the box. So every time you're going to play the game, you're going to have a different number of these, different set of these embassies in front of you. And I love that. That's awesome. You can upgrade the embassies, which means the abilities get better as you play. The issue is that one of the embassies, and I forget which one it is, on its 2nd level spot, when you upgrade it just once, you no longer have to pay a penalty for going onto the spot your opponents are. I actually misspoke earlier. You can go to where your opponent's pawn is, you just have to pay them a penalty in the form of resources and or tools, and that penalty escalates as you go into greater and greater eras. So, sorry about that. You do go where your opponents are, but you are helping them and hurting yourself by going there. And here was this thing where you just get the embassy and you upgrade it once, and now you can go where your opponents are, and you never have to pay penalties again for the rest of the game. So all three of us rushed to get to that second level as soon as we could when we hit the second era, and for the rest of the game, nobody cared where anybody was on the board. And it felt like a really weird omission. Like this whole part of the game, like the main way that you are interacting with your opponents, was removed by having this embassy out there on the table. I really didn't like that. We were essentially, all three of us were playing a completely, strictly solo experience and then trying to see who had the most points at the end of the game. And I like largely multiplayer solitaire style games, but I want some indirect competition, some indirect conflict in play, and once we all did that, that was completely removed. So there was literally no reason to care about where anybody was beyond how many points are they making. Oh, I want to make sure I'm making more points than them. And yeah, so I guess it's easy to just not play with that embassy. It's just very odd to have that in the game, especially at such a early step. Like, I think if that was something that you could unleash in the third or maybe the fourth era of the game, so for a small chunk of the game, you have this super cool ability that you have to invest a bunch of resources into getting to, then that would make sense. But it seemed like it was so easy to get there, it was almost a no-brainer, especially considering at the beginning of the game, we were just constantly on top of each other, trying to go where the opponents were, where my opponents were going, because they were going to good spots. They were going to spots that would make them goods, and they were going to spots that would get them more people to power all their factories. I definitely paid out penalties a couple times in that first era, so it was a no-brainer to try and not do that for the rest of the game, but I, again, just wish that wasn't there. So, talked about the Colonists way too much, but I definitely enjoyed the experience. It is a fascinating, humongous, epic-style package. There is so much in here, and I'm looking forward to trying it out, just not exactly the way I played it last time. Game number 6 is Imagine, and it's the last of the light games that I played at the convention. And I really enjoyed this game, and I've been interested in this one since I saw the very first images of the transparent cards on Board Game Geek like 7 or 8 months ago. What you're doing in this game is one person has a card, they draw a card, and then they pick, or one is picked for them, a random thing on it. It might be a person, or an idea, or a place, something like that. And then they have to get the people around the table to guess what that thing is by stacking these semi-transparent cards on top of each other that have symbols on them, like people, or fireplaces, or triangle, or flame, or water, or just a huge variety of different things that are somewhat specific, but also can be used in a variety of different ways if you try to get creative. And the game is called Imagine. And it definitely brings to mind the board game concept, which I really enjoy. And I feel like Imagine might just completely replace concept for me, because the way concept works is it's the same kind of style thing where one person's trying to convey a thought, a concept, or a person, or a thing to the people around the table, but they have this big board and they put these little colored cubes and question marks down to build concepts and concepts with the color and the shape of the thing, and is it fiction, is it a food, is it old, is it dying, is it aggressive, is it all those kind of things. But the problem with concept is that there have been several times where I've sat down and kind of taught it, and the people around the table have just not understood what they're supposed to do. It seems a little opaque at first. Once you get a round or two in, people usually click in and they get it. But with Imagine, it's just so obvious. You just, here it is, figure out what it is, and just play around with these and just make people guess it. And that's just the whole game. It makes so much sense, and we had a ton of fun playing this. We did not keep score, much like I don't think you should keep score in concept. And we just played for probably an hour. We went around the table a whole bunch of times until we all felt relatively satisfied. There were a bunch of laughs. There were a couple really brilliant rounds where somebody went so outside the box and made something work. There were several rounds that went a little bit too quickly, but it didn't matter. It was such a fun experience. I think this is a bit of a no-brainer. Like, this is one that almost every collection should have in for moments when you are waiting for more people to show up for your board game night, or maybe ending your game night with something that's light and fun and very easy to teach. It's just a super cool game, and I was just as impressed with it as I was hoping I would be. At number 5, we have Lorenzo il Magnifico, which I was pretty excited to try going into the convention. This is a worker placement style game, which in general I'm pretty lukewarm to, but had some pretty interesting tweaks to the overall system. The first of these is that everybody has 4 workers, and 3 of them are associated with these 3 colored dice that are rolled at the beginning of every round. You have a black, a white, and an orange. And what happens is you roll those dice, put them into the central board, and if the black die has a 3 on it, then that means that everybody's black worker is going to have a value of 3, and that's going to restrict some of the options of where you can go and the things you could do with that worker. If you rolled an orange 6, then everybody has a 6 value orange worker, and that's a much more powerful position to be in with that one spot. The 4th worker is a kind of a wild worker that has a value of 0, and you have to spend resources to bump up the value of that worker, so you could potentially do 4 actions, but you're not always going to do that. So I enjoy the fact that you have some variability on the strengths of your workers, but that it is a global variability so that if you roll really low with all the dice, well, everybody is going to have to deal with the ramifications of that. The next thing is that you are using these workers to place out on the board to build a tableau engine in front of you. Most of the spots out on the board that you're going to be going to let you draft cards and put them into this little player area in front of you, and one area is territories, and if you go to a different spot on the main board with a worker, you can activate your territories. Let's say you used a 3 value worker to go on there, and now you look down below, and every single one of your territories that has a 3 or lower in the little bottom left corner indication will make you stuff. And if you had maybe a territory card that had a 6, well, you're not going to be able to use that one. Odds are good it's a really good card, and so you're going to be probably trying to prioritize in producing goods with a worker that has a very high value on it, but everybody else is also thinking along those same lines. So you're not only trying to build an engine in front of you with these cards, but you're also considering the pip values on the cards that you are pulling down in front of you, because if they're all really low values, then you'll be much more likely to get benefit from them, but they're probably not as strong of individual cards as if you had a bunch of 5s and 6s in front of you, but it's going to be a lot harder to really evaluate all of them. But if you pull it off, man, you're going to get a ton of stuff. And then in addition to the territories, you can build these yellow buildings, which can use the resources that you maybe got from the territories and turn them into better things. There are also these individuals that you can hire and bring them down into your area that will give you game-breaking and game-bending abilities that might let you synergize various different things. And all these things worked really quite well. And I only played this once. It went a little long. I think our 4-player game was probably a little over 2 hours, which is more than I was expecting. And I will straight up admit that I played this game terribly. And in fact, 3 out of the 4 of us really kind of tripped on our shoelaces and fell down. Jessica is the 4th person, and she just ran away with it. Man, she made this amazing engine in front of her, because the 3 of us, what we're trying to do is everybody has these hidden cards in front of them that you actually do a draft for, and they are conditional based. Like once you match the condition on the card, you can play it, and it'll give you a really nice benefit for the rest of the game. And so 3 of us were really gunning to try and make the conditions work on our card, and it just so happened that all 3 of us were not getting territories because of this. The cards we had in our hands were not, they did not have anything to do with having territories necessarily in front of us. And it took too long to realize that we needed to grab those territories earlier, because the territories are essentially the way you put gas in your engine. Like the buildings are where you actually run your engine, but if you don't have any gas, then your engine isn't going to do anything. So the 3 of us were really resource starved the whole game because we never got enough of these territories going. And Jessica got a bunch of territories, and then she got some buildings, and man, she exploded. She just ran away with the game, and she really enjoyed it. I also enjoyed the experience, even though I did quite poorly. I just was playing the game, and I was like, I cannot wait to play this game again, so that I don't play it like a huge dummy like I did in this one particular play. And technically, those cards that you have that you kind of draft to shoot for, or I think they're like an advanced, not variant, but like a module you add into the game. And in retrospect, we probably shouldn't have played with those, but because I think we were a little misled by thinking that, oh, you got to shoot towards these cards, these are really good, and in lieu of actually building a good engine. And I feel like probably would have done a lot better at the game. And the other players, Matt and Claire, they were less enthusiastic about it in general. I think partly because it was a bit of a frustrating game, realizing too late that you had not started to build your engine up quite up enough. So that combined with the play length are somewhat detractors, but oh man, I just love the potential of this game. I love the idea of building those tableaus in front of you. I love the way that worker placement works when you're placing all these things out on the board. This is one that I actively very much want to play again, even though my friend Claire, she ended up deciding, she played it a second time, and that it really was not for her. And no game is going to be for everybody, but for some reason, even though I see the potential faults that are in this one, I love so many of the variants and things that are chunked in there that I want to play this one again, absolutely for sure. Terraforming Mars is game number 4, and I will admit, I was not in on all of the hype for this game. People have been screaming it from the mountaintops how amazing this game is, and every time I looked at it online, I just saw a bland looking board and some goofy art on some cards, and I was like, what is it about this game? Why are people so crazy about it? And I think if somebody had told me, hey, this game is a pure engine building game, you are just building an engine like crazy, potentially interacting with other people trying to mess up their engines, I would have been much more interested in going into it than I ended up being. The biggest reason I played this game was just to see what all the hype was about, and I ended up very much enjoying the play. It was a 5-player game. It was taught by Patrick Hillier, and we played it with the variant where we all started with 1 income on all of the things on our player board, because we've heard that the game can go a little bit long, and we're playing with 5 players, so we wanted it to be a somewhat more quicker experience where we saw what the game was without maybe having as slow of a start. That might make more sense if you're newer, if you are much more experienced with the game. But we did play with asymmetric company powers so that everybody had a special thing that was associated with only them and that helped with the direction of which you are playing the game. And I really ended up enjoying the engine building parts of this game because every single turn you were just drawing cards, and it has this really fascinating thing where you draw cards, but then you have to buy the ones that you want. So you spend money in order to put the cards actually into your hand, and then you need to spend more money in order to play these cards out in front of you. And you might have some discounts, you might be able to spend some of the resources on your player mat to get a card played out in front of you a little bit cheaper. But in the end of the day, this game is all about increasing your income on your straight money, increasing the income of steel, of heat, of plants, of all these different things, and then using those things to squeeze victory points out of a whole bunch of nooks and crannies in the game. Most of the cards that you are playing in front of you are going to work towards either increasing those incomes or giving you little levers that you can pull in order to do something cool, like smash an asteroid into the planet somewhat quicker, or I guess maybe you don't pull a lever to smash an asteroid, but you know, ways to maybe heat the planet up much more quickly. I had one that let me put out water tiles, which increased the, I believe, temperature of the planet, or maybe that's the oxygen level. I don't remember exactly, but putting the water out there was definitely a good thing, and it helped your engine because every time you increased the temperature or the oxygenation level of the planet, you increased your overall money income at the beginning of every single one of your turns. So just every single thing that you're doing is building little engines into medium-sized engines into big engines, and you just hope that at the end of the game, your engine is going to win out. Now, you are placing little city tiles out on the main board, and you get points for the number of forests that are adjacent to them. So there are some things that you do that are not necessarily engine-based, that are just raw points, but you could also do those actions the boring way by just spending a bunch of money and it's printed on the board, or some of the cards you play down will let you do those at a discount, or maybe do this every single time you do something else because of an engine-building combo that you were able to pull together. Now, this deck is humongous, so the cards you have available to you, and every single card is unique, but it does mean that card draw luck is going to come into play, and I've heard there is a drafting variant where every single round, instead of just drawing cards and buying the ones you want, you actually draw the cards. I think you then draft the cards, and then you buy the ones you want, and I think that is probably going to be the way to play this game because you're going to see a lot more cards and you're going to be much more able to find pieces that fit into your engine better. I came in 3rd out of 5 players, which I think is pretty good for a first game for me, especially considering 3 out of the 5 players had played it before. But I will admit that I had one lever that I ever got in the game. It's these blue cards, and I only got to pull it once, because by the time I got it out, it was one that let me put the water down on the planet. Pretty much all the water was gone, and before I got to use that card again, all the water was completely depleted. Whereas somebody across the table from me, I think he came in 2nd place, or maybe he won, he had a whole bunch of these different things he could do. He'd like activate this card in order to make some of these little microbes, and then he'd activate this card to turn the microbes into birds, I think, and then activate another card to use birds to do this kind of thing. It was like a whole bunch of really cool gears that locked in together and did a whole bunch for him, and I wanted to do that. And I think that I would have been much more likely to be able to build something like that if I had been doing the card draft style of play. I think it's likely that I will want to continue playing where everybody starts with an income of 1 at the beginning of every game because, well, it's going to make the game go shorter, I think. It's going to get you into the fun, meaty parts of the game quicker, and I don't think I necessarily am going to be looking for a punishing, longer style game with Terraforming Mars. Maybe someday I'll give it a shot. I'm going to be playing a 3-player game of this in a couple days, and I'm going to be teaching this game, and I think I will be teaching that where everybody starts with an income of 1, because that just definitely seems like the way to play your first game of Terraforming Mars, and I like that it is a decent option going forward with potentially every single game that you play. Oracle of Delphi is the #3 game of the convention for me, and this is the newest Stefan Feld game, and I will admit, I did not go into this game thinking I would like it as much as I would. I, in general, enjoy Stefan Feld games, and in general, they are point-salad games, where just everything that you do is going to give you little points for doing this and little points for doing that. But Oracle of Delphi is a big breakaway because there are 0 victory points in this game. It is a pure race where you are trying to do 12 different objectives, which I guess you could consider them 12 points, but it doesn't really count that way because you're just going to go until somebody completes all 12 of them and then races back to the starting spot where Zeus is, and that person is going to win the game. So right from the get-go, it was kind of a fresh new take on Stefan Feld style games, and I will admit, when we first started the game, I was not having the best time. Specifically, the very first turn was an analysis paralysis downtime black hole. We taught the game, and I think I might have been the first player, or maybe the second. We were playing a 3-player game of it, and I sat there for probably 3, 5, 4 minutes. I don't know, I can't even remember. I went into this mental cycle state just trying to find out what I was going to do to start this game, because you have this little boat and the 12 tasks are split into 4 different types. You need to kill 3 monsters. You need to pick up 3 different colored goods and deliver them to the matching temples. You need to pick up 3 statues and deliver them to the matching spots on these little boards. And the last thing is, I can't think of it at the moment, but either way, you get the idea. So you have this little boat, and you only have one boat, and you're going to go in a direction and try to do some things. And we started kind of in the middle of the board, so much of the analysis for me was just, what direction do I start in? Because you don't want to start going this way and then realize that at the beginning of your second turn, no, actually I want to go down here, because that's a really big waste of time and action points, because you are using dice in order to do all the actions in the game, which is a really neat idea. Because what you do is at the end of your turn, you roll these 3 dice and then you put them on the Oracle spot on your board. And if you roll a black die, then you could do a variety of different things with it. You could move your ship until you get to the spot that has a black symbol on it in the ocean, as long as it's not, I think, more than 3 spaces away from your ship, but that overall sailing distance can be increased. You could also use a black die to pick up a black cube. You could also use a black die to drop off a black cube. You get the idea. So I had these dice that were rolled in front of me, and I'm looking at the board and just trying to map out realistically what I want to do for the next 2 to 3 turns, because I want to go in a good direction. And I ended up picking a good trajectory, and my second turn went a lot faster because my first turn was essentially me mapping out multiple turns. And from that point on, we never really had any analysis paralysis or too much downtime as we were playing the game, which I was really thankful of. I was very worried with that first turn taking so long that this was going to be an overly long game, but it wasn't. I think it came in maybe a little under 90 minutes, something like that, and I ended up winning the game by the skin of my teeth, essentially. If I hadn't won, then Claire, who was the next player, would have won on her turn, and I think we decided that if it had gone to Matt, he also would have been able to win on his turn. So it was very close, and I like that because about halfway through the game, it really felt like I was running away with it. And it's never fun to be running away with a game. You want to feel like things are somewhat tight, and seeing it come back together again near the very end of the game and have it be so close was a good thing. I mean, I obviously like to win, but you don't want it to be just blowing things out of the water, because you are doing a surprising amount of engine building in this game. I know I've mentioned engine building a lot. It is one of my favorite mechanisms in board games, and nobody really mentioned to me, and I never saw this in any of the articles about the game, that you are going to be getting these cards that let you do new things when you do other things. And so for instance, when you kill monsters, you're going to gain equipment cards. There's a big stack of them, and you are going to just draw it, and now you have a new thing available to you. For me, I pulled a card that said, every time I roll a black die for my Oracle, I'm going to just gain 2 free favors. Like, well, that's awesome. And I think later on, I was able to, later on, when I did one of the dropping a cube off at a temple, I was able to hire a person into my area, and I hired a person that made my black die wild. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. So anyway, black dice were really good for me whenever I rolled them. I got these favors, which you can use to modify the color of the dice that you rolled, and I also was able to do anything I wanted with the black die. It was a very flexible thing, and in fact, on that last turn where I won, I rolled 2 black dice. And if I had not rolled 2 black dice, I would not have won the game, because black die were so powerful to me, because I had this little engine going on, that I was able to do the last things I needed to do and zip all the way back to the finish line. Now, the caveat here is that I got lucky in drawing that card that also worked for the black die for my area. Whereas Claire, for instance, at the beginning of the game, we all start with a special unique ability. And her unique ability is that she got to move fast. And she felt like she was maybe falling a little bit behind with killing the monsters, so she finally was able to get some shields together, and she killed a monster, and she drew a card, which made her faster. And she was kind of bummed. She's like, I already moved fast enough. Okay, well, whatever. And the next time she went and killed a monster, she drew another card. And I can't remember exactly what it did, but it helped her sail better again. And she was starting to get a little bit frustrated because the game was randomly dictating the kind of engine-y cards she got. And it was really not the thing that she wanted to focus on. She wanted to focus on maybe making her dice do more interesting things like I was doing over in my area. And that sort of thing. So I think my biggest criticism of the game at this point is the randomness of drawing those cards. And I mean, it's never good to just start throwing out house rules right from the very beginning, but I can't help but wonder if a variant might well be in order where when you kill a monster, you draw 2 and pick 1, or something like that. A very subtle variation so you can try to have a greater chance of being able to build an engine that works really well for you, because having engines are fun, and the last thing you want is to have somebody luck into a great engine and have you get all these pieces that just don't mesh together very well, and maybe you lose the game and you feel like maybe that's why you lost the game. So at the end of the day, I really enjoyed every single turn of the game as I was playing it. There's other aspects to it where you can get injuries, and both Matt and Claire lost multiple turns. You just can lose a turn entirely if you don't take care of your injuries enough. But my starting ability was I started with some shields, and shields let you not take injuries, and I didn't end up losing any turns throughout the game. So I think I actually took 2 to 3 more turns than Claire, and I think 2 more turns than Matt, or vice versa. And you can still see how close the end of game ended up being, so that shows you that the starting abilities seemed somewhat symmetrical and balanced at the end of the day. But anyway, I think I don't want to talk about this one too much more. I viscerally enjoyed the racing experience of the game. I enjoyed the way all the pieces work together. I'm just worried about the randomness of the card draw. Coming in at number 2, we've now got Railroad Revolution. And this was not near the top of the list of games that I really wanted to play at the convention, but it looked interesting enough. I'd actually read the rules to the game, and it is published by What's Your Game. They're the ones that came out with Nippon and Signoria last year, and I liked Nippon, and I didn't really like Signoria, so a bit of a mixed track record as far as the games that they were producing. And we were able to sit down and play a game of this, and I was really blown away. I was super surprised at how much I ended up loving this game. I think we were about a third to halfway through the game when I think I just exploded with excitement just out of the blue. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Just like, oh, I'm loving everything I'm thinking about while I'm actually playing it. I had no problems with the downtime, with analysis paralysis, or any of that, because the moment I finished my turn, I was starting to think about my next turn, and I didn't really care how long it took to get back to me because there were so many things that you could think about on your turn. It seemed like you always had like 5 awesome actions, and you're just trying to figure out which one of these is the one you're actually going to go with, which one is slightly better than the other ones. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's talk about how this game actually works. Thematically, this is the Railroad Revolution. You're trying to build railroad tracks to cover the United States. You are building down telegraph lines, and you're trying to build stations in all these different cities as you start on the East Coast and you work your way to the West. Now, mechanically, you are doing this by action selection. You have a little board in front of you that shows you the 4 actions that you can do on your turn, and that is your turn. You just take one of your little action pawns, which are these little workers, you put it on a spot, and you evaluate that action. However, the first complication comes in that you have these boring white workers, but then you have these interesting colored workers. There's gray, purple, orange, and blue. And they are associated with different things. I think like one's an engineer and one's an investor or something like that. I don't remember how they all worked out, but if you use one of those workers instead of the plain boring ones, you could get benefits when you go to a spot that is specific to that spot. It might be discounts, it might be bonuses, that kind of thing. For instance, if you were to want to build railroad track down on the map, it's a very basic thing. You need to do that in order to expand, in order to build new buildings out on the map. Well, you could go there with the boring worker and spend a bunch of money in order to do that, or you could go there with, I think it's the orange worker, I don't remember exactly, and pay half as much money as you were going to spend, which is a big deal. That's a very large benefit. Or you could go there with the purple worker, and I honestly, at this point, have forgotten exactly what they all do, but that might let you build a new train, or it might let you cash out money for how many shares you have in front of you. There's just a wide variety of different options. And each of the 4 actions that you do have a specific customized bonus for the 4 special colored workers. And you don't have any restrictions about where you can put the workers down in front of you. You could go to the same spot multiple times, and once you've used all of your workers, you just, as a free action, pull them all off your board and jump right back into it. So it's not even like you have a reset turn where you have to pull the things off and not do anything else. So you're just constantly in the action, constantly doing things. And like I said, I was super surprised at how engaged and interesting all of the decisions were in this game, because you are shooting after a whole bunch of different things. You have these goals that you have in front of you that I believe are face up. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're face up once you actually start working on them. And they might say you want to have buildings in specific cities, or have railroad track that are on specific hazard zones, or that kind of thing. And once you satisfy those, you flip them over and you get a bunch of points. And then you can take a new one from the stack, but you take it from an upgraded stack. So as you continue to complete these objectives, you dig into the more and more lucrative stacks, but they're also kind of timed to be more and more associated with late game things. So once you get to the very end stacks, you're probably going to need to be putting houses down on the west coast of the United States. And in order to do that, you needed to build track all the way over there. So you're kind of doing everything all at the same time. And then you are customizing your endgame victory conditions, because, not conditions, sorry, but your endgame victory point conditions. There you go. You keep playing the game until somebody builds all of their pieces on their board. Well, all but 3, but that's getting into the minutia. And once you get to that point, you play one more round, and then you score points. And you have these tracks that will give you a sliding scale of points based on how much you put into them. So you might get a bunch of points out of the telegraph spots that you put on the board if you bumped that scoring marker up really high. But if you didn't, because you didn't play poorly, then you're not going to get as many points out of that as you wanted to. So you're constantly trying to increase the score trackers on the things that you are already doing. I've talked a lot about how this game plays, I apologize, but I wanted you to get an idea, because all of the things that you're thinking about. You have all these different workers, you have all 4 of these options. The workers have different special benefits. You can do some really cool combo type things, not necessarily within a given turn usually, but you could do this and the next turn you'll do this, which sets you up perfectly for the following turn to do that. Those kind of things are very fun to pull off, but I will admit, I've played this once and I loved it. I bought a copy, I actually have it upstairs, I haven't been able to play it yet. I'm super excited about it, but I've heard some rumblings about the balance of the different roads to victory. One of my friends that I played with played it again, and he mentioned to me that he was starting to be a little bit concerned that the telegraph is a little bit too easy to get a bunch of points out, to the point where it might be kind of a thing that you must do every time you play the game. You just got to go hard on telegraph because it's so easy to get all those points. I've seen a thread on Board Game Geek that seems to corroborate that, but I've also talked to another friend who thought that the objectives were very powerful, and that the objectives were more powerful than those telegraph spots. So I'm excited to dig into this one more. I'm probably going to try to push the limits a little bit, like play a game where I don't even touch the telegraph and just go crazy on those objectives and see how I do, versus another game where I just go really hard on the telegraph. I'm excited to explore all these things. I'm a little worried that I might find imbalance, and that might kill some of the buzz around this game, but the actual actions of taking your turns as you are playing this game were so much fun to me the first time I played it that I'm not overly concerned. I'm super looking forward to getting this one to the table again. And here we are, we finally hit the #1 best game that I played at Board Game Geek.con 2016, and that is Lisboa. This is the newest game designed by Vital Lacerda, who is well known for making highly thematic, highly complex, and quite heavy style board games. And in general, I am not a heavy board gamer. I like some heavy board games, but it is definitely not my wheelhouse. I own The Gallerist, which is a game he came out with a year or 2 ago now, and that was supposed to be one of his lighter style games, but it was still quite heavy for me and my group. I played it twice, and I think both those plays went way over 2 hours. I enjoyed The Gallerist, but it did not necessarily blow me away, but Lisboa absolutely did. So let's talk about the context of the situation. The game is coming out next year. It's currently on Kickstarter, I think. It depends on what time you're watching this video. And this was a, like I said, pre-production copy that Paul Grogan brought over, and he set up, I think, 4 plays of the game throughout the convention. I signed up for the Friday night one. It was a 4-player game, and it was associated with a heavy cardboard meetup. So we were playing it up in a boardroom kind of way in the upper parts of the hotel, not in the main space of the convention, which is kind of nice because it can be kind of loud down there, and I really feel like we benefited from having a quiet situation. So Paul taught the game, and it has to do with the reconstruction of Lisboa after a whole bunch of terrible things happened to it, like floods and earthquakes and fires, all sorts of terrible things. So you're rebuilding the city. And Paul taught the game, and we randomly decided that I was going to be the first person to take a turn. And so Paul finished teaching it, and there were so many rules, and the way that everything worked together did not really make sense to me at that point. That we all kind of like looked at each other in each other's eyes and like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. But it was my first turn, so I decided, you know what? Paul said that you need to have boats in order to ship stuff. Shipping stuff is good, so on my first turn, I made a boat. And that ended up doing pretty well for me, and by the time I got to my second turn, I maybe had a little bit better of an idea of what I wanted to do. And as I continued to play the game, it continued to wow me more and more as I kind of figured out how it was supposed to be played. It was probably close to halfway through this game that I really felt like I finally understood how all the gears connected. It was probably about that spot, maybe a little bit less, like 40% through the game, that I looked over at Paul and I said, wait, our buildings can produce resources? Like, I had totally missed the fact, and that's a really big part of the game, that you are building these buildings out into Lisboa and you can actually produce resources from them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should probably build some buildings so that I can make some resources. I was a little bit behind the ball on that specific part of the game, and at the end I ended up coming in second place, which I felt very good about. However, Isaac Childress was one of the people who was playing the game. He's the guy who designed Gloomhaven and Forge War. He obliterated us. I came in second, and he had 50% more points. I pretty much went around the scoring track once, and he went around 1.5 times. So I felt like I did pretty good, but man, that guy really definitely got it much more. I was also playing it with Travis from Low Player Count. It was really great to meet both of those guys. We had a lot of fun. Definitely some laughs while we were trying to figure out how this game worked. And so let's talk a little bit more about the bones of this game. Because when you go really high level and talk about it, about the structure of a turn, it's really simple. You just play a card from your hand, and then you draw a card, and your turn is over. But man, the things that you could do that branch off from the playing of those cards is fascinating. I mean, it's no spoiler to know that this game completely blew my socks off, and it really had a lot to do with those decisions. So, when you play a card, you can choose, it's kind of a branching tree of things you can do. So you have this card, you can either play it into your tableau in front of you, you tuck it either under or you tuck it up or down, and then you get to do something if you want to, or you could play it on the board. So let's say that you tucked it on your board. So now you can either do one thing, which is, I believe, shipping your goods, or you could do another thing, which is going to allow you to look at the board and then evaluate 2 more things that are on the board. So you first split, you're like, is it going to go here or here? Okay, it's going to go here. Now I'm going to use this here or here. Okay, I'm going to use it here. Now that I'm using it here, I look to those 6 things and I pick 2 out of those 6 things to do those things. So that's just one potential path. Or if you play that card onto the board, then now that, depending on what kind of card it is, might evaluate one of 3 different things, which might let you build buildings or build commercial buildings, or instead you could evaluate some of those 6 different options that you could get at through the other way. So there's 2 different ways to do it, but this time you can do it for free, but in order to actually evaluate that, you have to spend a different kind of resource. So as you can see, it just has this branching tree of decisions, all based around playing one card. And then one of the most brilliant parts of this game, and it's not necessarily that innovative, but I loved it so much, was that when your turn is over, you draw a new card into your hand. However, there are 4 face-up piles of cards, so you know exactly what card you're pulling into your hand. So you can plan ahead, you look to those 4 options, unless it's the very end of the game, in which case the stacks might dry up a little bit. I guess halfway through the game, they also might dry up, but that's beside the point. You have options. You can plan ahead, you see what you can do, and you pull those things in and you just make plans. This game is all about making plans and building engines, specifically with trying to get those buildings out into Lisboa so that they can make resources, that you could use those resources to ship them off or do a variety of other different things. But that isn't just where you are building your engine. In fact, it has these 2 other really awesome things going on. The first thing, kind of interestingly enough, reminded me of La Isla, which is a Stefan Feld game, which is well known for being a very light Euro-style game. But it's kind of funny to feel those vibes in this big, heavy game. But when you slide these cards into your area, you are actually doing a modified engine building style, much like in La Isla when you slide those into your little player board, so you have a constantly evolving engine. So when you tuck this under, you might immediately get a benefit, and then the thing that is showing there is going to tell you that whenever you sell maybe your treasure chests, you're going to get an extra $2. Or maybe this one right here says that whenever you build a building, the rubble in that spot costs less money to remove. And you are constantly modifying this little tucked engine in front of you based off of the short to medium run goals that you want to do, and you are only allowed to tuck a certain number of cards in your area based on the variety of rubble that you have cleared from the city of Lisboa. Like, the idea here is that you are rebuilding the city. Part of that involves building buildings, and as you build these buildings, you clear rubble out. So you can have more and more of these tuck cards as the game progresses if you are clearing rubble correctly in a very smart pattern. So, oh man, I just love the way you had to decide what you want to keep, because you might only be able to have 3 things tucked, and so you look down, and if you want to play a card in front of you, you must tuck it. So if you want to do that action, you have to look at the 3 things and you decide which one of those 3 things are you able to get rid of now? Like, which one is the least good thing for you in this moment that's going to hurt you the least going forward, not having it in your area? You get rid of that thing and you tuck the new thing, and the next time it comes around to you, if you want to play to your player area again, you once again have that decision. You also, on your player area, have a little spot that gives you some other kind of game mechanic bending abilities that can sync up with the cards that you have tucked under your player area, and you can get these by moving this little clergyman around out on the main board. I'm probably going into too much of the minutia now, but you should be able to have some idea to see how this game is playing out. You just have such a wonderful set of decisions to make from just playing a single card from your hand, and you are spinning all of these different gears, and the gears are clinking together in all sorts of wonderful ways. The way you build these buildings are going to give you points based on how the different rows and columns are matching up. When you build commercial buildings versus private buildings, oh, there are just so many little aspects to this game. It is definitely, for me, a heavyweight game, and it is definitely a complex game, and it's definitely a game that I want to play more and that I want to dig into more, because the Gallerist did not have these engine buildy style things going on, and I just love having this modified style of incentives that you are constantly pushing around on your on your player board. Now, I am not looking forward to teaching this game because it is not easy, and it's kind of unfortunate that when you play a game like this, you are going to want to, the first game has a humongous asterisk on it because you're probably just not going to get it. I guess Isaac Childress got it. I mean, he totally killed us when he played it, so I think he really understood it. Specifically, there's a whole other part of the game where you can jump in and take actions on other players' turns, and Isaac did a really good job of doing that. I think he probably ended up taking 3 to 5 more turns than I did in the game, which does a pretty good idea of explaining the big point differential. I did not do a very good job of jumping on that, but I think it's going to take several games of this before you really feel like you definitely understand how all this stuff is working together, but I want to play multiple games of this. The last thing that I haven't mentioned is that we played a 4-player game of it where we were all very confused at the beginning, and it took just a little over 2 hours. I was really happy to see that play length, because I don't mind a game going to like 3 hours, but if a game is that long, it's going to not hit the table anywhere near as often. So with that, I'm much more confident that this is a game that could be played more often at board game night type situations, because if a 4-player game where everybody's new took 2 hours, well then maybe a 3-player game where everybody's played a couple of games under their belt, that's probably going to be like an hour 20 minutes or something like that, and you can fit that in all over the place. So these are all the reasons why this game ended up being my #1 of the convention. As I mentioned before, I loved it. It blew my socks off. You might not know it from the videos that I make, but I actually swear somewhat often in real life, and I swore a lot, just like, holy bleep, that is amazing, and just like sitting there in my hand and just suddenly being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I can't wait till it's my turn. You know, just like all these moments like that, just to get so excited about the next turn, about doing the next awesome thing. And I just love it when board games give you awesome turns like that, and I am officially rambling way too long about this game. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. Lisboa, definitely my #1 of the convention. And with that, I have now talked about every single game that I played at BoardGameGeek.con 2016. I hope you've enjoyed some of these initial impressions. Many of these games that I played, I'm looking forward to playing more, digging into and seeing if my initial impressions hold up, or if maybe some of the thoughts that I had were just completely bonkers and off the wall. I can already tell you, since I'm filming this about a week after I filmed my 11 through 25, that people have pointed out some rules that I got wrong in some of those games that I played before, and unfortunately that's just a reality of board games in general, and specifically playing board games at conventions, because it's loud, there's a lot of things going on, and oftentimes it's being played from the rulebook straight away where nobody has actually played the game before, so you can miss subtle key rules here and there, which unfortunately sometimes can detract from the overall experience. But yeah, it was an amazing convention. I had a ton of fun playing all sorts of games, and I'm really looking forward to going back to it next year. So at this point, I would love to thank everybody who has been supporting the channel through Patreon, including all these producer-level pledges. If you too would like to help the channel out by directly supporting it, you can do so at patreon.com/JonGetsGames, and I would super appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to see more vlogs like this one, as well as full game playthroughs and in-depth board game reviews, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.